Welcome to the Big Business on Campus podcast by John Wall Street, powered by Playfly Sports and sponsored by Shorts Logistics. So exciting day today. Corey and I have a special guest here with us, John Currie, the athletic director at Wake Forest. We're so excited to have you, John. Your esteemed career, but not only about your career, you got so many plans coming in the future that we want to dig in and talk about because you're creating a lot of buzz around the industry and what you're doing there at Wake, both from the sports side and from the building and development and real estate mixed use side. So we just have a ton of topics to dig in. So we're excited to chat with you today and give our audience a little bit of an inside view into all the amazing work that you've got going on at Wake Forest. So thanks again for our audience for joining us here for these podcasts. We're excited to keep the great dialogue and stories going throughout the college ecosystem. So, Corey, I'll hand it over to you. But thanks again, John, for being here. We appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Michael.
Hey, John. Excited to see you again. John and I were at a dinner together in New York just a few weeks ago. John, let's get started. You previously held some roles at Kansas State and Tennessee before you got to Wake. But a lot has changed over the last couple of years, right? NIL, college athlete compensation. How has your job on a day-to-day basis evolved relative to even just a couple of years ago?
Well, Corey, thanks so much. I appreciate you guys having me on. And obviously, I sit here at Wake Forest University, literally in the same building here in 2025 that I started my career in 1993 when Ron Wellman, who was our athletic director here, transformational athletic director for 27 years, hired me as an intern on August 16th, 1993. Now I was very blessed to be selected to follow Ron. Nobody could replace him in 2019. And so this is my 7th year back here. And so 8 years at Kansas State, a year at Tennessee as an athletic director. So I think that adds up to about 16 years since 2009, 32 years overall, or 32 at 3 great institutions at Kansas State, Wake Forest, and Tennessee, all different institutions. And there's no question that the job has evolved in lots of different directions. I would say that the one thing that certainly with what we've dealt with over the last 5 years or 6 years, if you think about COVID, and then some of the conference alignment stuff, media disruption, all this stuff we've had to deal with, I probably spend less time interacting one-on-one with student athletes and coaches than I would prefer to. Well, I definitely spend less than I would prefer to, but a lot less than I ever have. And so, in a way, though, that makes those moments with those athletes and with coaches even more rewarding, because when you do have that moment to interact with a student athlete around campus or a coach or post game or on a team flight or whatever, it's a great reminder of what's really at the center of what we still do, even with all this television stuff and media and building, et cetera.
That's awesome. So when you look at the rapid change of college athletics and your amazing tenure and career, what do you think people underestimate the most, or maybe are misunderstood the most about college athletics and what it takes to be a successful program and leader?
Well, Michael, I don't know if I have great answers to the questions, but I would give the context that I actually have a slide that I use in a bunch of different presentations, right? And it basically is 2009 to 2025. And on the beginning of the slide in 2009, it's got it's a timeline, right? And it's got some different pictures and images, but it starts out with an image of Ed O'Bannon, both a live image and an avatar image from the game, right? And it ends with an image of Claudia Wilkin, right? And then July 1, 2025. And so that 16-year period, which happens to coincide with my career as an athletics director, first at Kansas State and now at Wake, is basically you got 3 things. You have the beginning and the current point where we are, hopefully near an end of the labor disputes, antitrust cases, all those kinds of things. You've got the peak of the media rights bundle, and I don't know, you guys would know better than me, but somewhere in the 2011, 2012 point in time, right? And then the rapid devolution of the media rights bundle and the emergence of all this other stuff, right? And then you have conference alignment, which
Yep.
is a symptom of both of those things, right? So, and because other than my 1 year as athletic, or 8 months, I should say, as athletic director at Tennessee in the middle, I've pretty much been at great institutions, Kansas State and Wake Forest, in that period of time that are not going to be the conversation drivers of media rights revenue or conference alignment, et cetera, but are
Mm.
very much going to be affected, perhaps disproportionately more than other schools. And so I can even remember about 2013 or 14, checking in with one of my great friends and longtime colleagues. I was at K State at the time, who was happened to be at the SEC, at a pretty significant, kind of brand school, upper market school of that league. And I said, "Hey, what are you hearing about alignment? What are you thinking?" and stuff like that. And this particular AD said, "Well, I don't think about it at all. Should I be?" Right? And so it just goes to show, like, the jobs, depending on where you are, it can be a little bit different in terms of how you have to spend your time and allocate your energy, and the problems or the challenges and the opportunities, because we certainly have them at Wake Forest, just like we did at Kansas State, and the opportunities. It's a little bit different in terms of how you spend your time in each of those places.
I'm glad that you brought that up because you said, Wake is not driving the conversation here. How do you go about defining success and then managing donor expectations at a school where you, one, may not have the financial resources of some of the larger programs in the conference, but also you have these super high academic expectations?
Well, you really have to look at what your advantages are as an institution, right? So certainly, we look at Wake Forest, and we've done some work to try to do a better job of fitting him into the pitch, right, the elevator pitch, right. And so our advantages as an institution and the characteristics which we have that other people have some of but might not have all of them, starts with the academic distinction of a great national university. Now, we still have to do more work to tell that story, and athletics happens to be a really good platform to tell the story. For instance, the Wake Forest University School of Medicine is the academic core of the second largest nonprofit medical system in the country. Atrium Advocate is our system. We're bigger than UNC Chapel Hill's medical system. We're bigger than Duke, through our system. So using athletics to tell those stories, right? Um, Second thing is that we've won and we win. We have the winningest program in the state of North Carolina in the ACC this century, right? We've only had 3 head coaches this century. We won the championship this century. We're the only person in the state that's done that, right? So we do win. So we got to tell that story. Um, we got aligned leadership. We've got great facilities, and one of our advantages at Wake Forest is that our facilities are pretty much debt free. We got a little bit of long term debt on Coliseum and Stadium that goes back to the construction days, but everything we've built, $175 million in the last 12 years or so, much of that predates me under Ron's leadership. We've done with donor money, so we're not using media rights revenue to fund the construction of our football operations building, which in our case is McCray Football Complex, right? And then the last part about us is the geographic advantage of being right smack in the middle of the state of North Carolina, which is the third fastest growing state in the country. In a couple of years, the state of North Carolina will pass Georgia and Ohio and be the seventh largest state for population in the country. We're 80 minutes from Charlotte. We got a huge academic presence in Charlotte. So, taking those 5 distinctives, that's how we build our strategy, because we're building it around our advantages.
John, is there anything that you and some of the other perhaps smaller private schools can do to share or collaborate together, perhaps offset some of the capital disparities?
Yeah, I appreciate that question, Corey, and we do look at our I don't want to say peer schools, because the reality of it is that Wake Forest, from an academic perspective, our competitive peer set is Virginia, UNC Chapel Hill, Michigan, Southern Cal, University of Florida, and also universities like Washington University and St. Louis. But it's much more like major national schools than it is, regional, small elite academic schools. So that has changed. But if you look at Duke University, you think about a great athletic director who's doing a great job that maybe people don't know because her predecessor was so good. But Nina King does a great job at Duke, right? And then, I was on the phone with Blake James this morning, at Boston College, and looking at some of the similarities that we have. One of the advantages of the Atlantic Coast Conference is, our 18 schools, including Notre Dame, of course, which which plays a partial football schedule, we have the best aggregation of nationally ranked academic universities in the country by far, right? And we also in the ACC, I can't remember the numbers right, but we have 7 private schools and a couple that essentially are non-state supported,
Mm.
that are private schools from an academic perspective. So we like the neighborhood we live in, and we do collaborate and look at some of those ways we can leverage those strengths.
Hey, John, let's hit on that point. That's a really interesting point. Private. How do you think about that in terms of creating an advantage, or how does that change the dynamic between maybe whether it's inside of the ACC or just in sort of the leading college athletic departments in the country? How does private give you that advantage in this space?
Well, I mean, I think there's disadvantages and advantages. I'm fortunate. I spent 11 years total at the University of Tennessee, and I spent 8 years at Kansas State, public universities, in serving really different, all with academic excellence and different kinds of missions as an institution. Um, you know, One of the advantages of the private school is, it's kind of like a private company, Michael. We're not thinking about earnings calls and public board meetings and things like that, which my public school AD counterparts, of which I was one for 9 years, that factors in, and that affects how you plan business. You got to manage your, open records meeting act. You can't have too many trustees in the same room and all that kind of stuff. So there is a nimbleness that private school, non-state supported, I should say, provides, or non-government supported provides. There's disadvantages too, certainly from a funding standpoint, right?
Mm.
We're all competing against heavily subsidized public universities and having to figure out how to, make that thing work, on the field of competition. But I got mentioned the Atrium Health Wake Forest Baptist combination from a medical system standpoint. That's how that deal got done, because our board and our president at the time was able to do that, a very complex deal, as a private university. With the business points of it was doable in that kind of set. Sometimes with the big public, it's so cumbersome that it's hard to get a business deal done.
Mm.
John, you hit on facilities before. We released we being John Wall Street, released a thematic report this week or recently, by the time the podcast comes out, on the subject of mixed use development tied to stadiums and arenas. Wake Forest was one of, if not the first college to pursue this strategy. Tell us a little bit about the grounds, explain its origin story, what problems you were trying to solve for, and what led to the development.
Yeah, well, first of all, there are plenty of universities that in some format have done mixed use, and it looks different at all different places. I know that my good friend and colleague Jamie Pollard, who's probably one of the most astute, successful, productive athletic tenures ever at Washington. I mean, at Iowa State. Sci-Town is something he's been working on for probably 8 years now. Florida State, the Seminole Boosters, and they've done a great job with College Town. Those are all places that have transformed communities. And so the grounds at Wake Forest is a pretty interesting story, because you can choose lots of different starting points. Because even going back 30 or 40 years, as the land east of Wake Forest, of which Wake Forest used to own almost none, gradually Wake Forest accumulated, going back to 1967 when the football stadium, which is now Legacy Federal Credit Union Stadium, was built. And then over the years, as different pieces of land became available or just fell into Wake Forest's lap, like when if you guys read Barbarians at the Gate or watched the movie, our neighbor is R.J. Reynolds. And when Ross Johnson moved the company to Atlanta in 1987, he gave Wake Forest the world headquarters building of RJR Nabisco, which we've operated as an office building for since 1987, however long that is. And then over time, part of it is a story of economic transformation of a community, because there used to be 5,000 tobacco workers like a half a mile from where I am, and until the 1990s. And then they all left and went to a more modern plant and much smaller workforce. about 15 miles north. So all of a sudden, you had 3 million square feet of manufacturing that's basically vacant, and then that has a negative effect on the shops and restaurants, et cetera, that are also adjacent to our campus that used to serve all those folks and our students and our university community members. But then we've got this great sports entertainment complex with a coliseum, stadium, fairgrounds that the city owns, a baseball stadium that the city used to own that now we own. So you got about 150 acres total, including land the city owns. It's right next to our campus. It's next to Old Town Golf Club, which is a top 100 golf club in the world. That's 2 miles or 3 miles from our great downtown here in Winston-Salem. That's 2 miles from a great private aviation airport, Winston-Salem Smith Reynolds, which is actually the busiest non-commercial airport in the state, in Wake Forest, which is a highly ranked university. And you've got these athletic facilities and entertainment facilities that have 800, 750, 800,000 visitors a year already. And then you've got all this vacant land and down market shops and restaurants around it. So Wake Forest acquired some of that land 25 years ago, almost 20 years ago. But it really stalled any development of that when in the Great Recession in '09. So fast forward to 2019, in the intermediate period of time, Wake Forest and the city partnered downtown Winston-Salem with Innovation Quarter, completely transformed that area. I arrived in 2019, and in the area around the Coliseum that we now call the grounds is really, and much of which we own, and we bought the Coliseum from the city in 2013, is really dilapidated and boarded up shops and torn down empty retail pads. It looked terrible. And this is like a terrible looking group, 100 acres that Wake Forest owns. And so it's a blighted area. And guess who owns the blight? We do, right? And so how do we leverage that into improved space for the whole community? But also, how can we create some revenue streams over time, both from a tax-based standpoint? We own this land. We're not making any money on it. How can we generate some revenue? How can we make it a more attractive destination and grow that visitation from 750 to 1 million for these facilities? And then how can we improve the community and the interest to our university? And so that really started in earnest again 6 years ago, and then we had some great moments in time in 21, 22, 23 that enables us to catch fire.
This episode is brought to you by Shorts Sport Travel Logistics, the fastest growing leader in college athletics travel and the trusted choice of over 108 athletic departments nationwide. With their promise, Team Travel Made Easy, Shorts simplifies every aspect of team travel: air charters, commercial flights, buses, and hotels. By turning complex logistics into a competitive advantage, they've become the trusted choice for programs committed to winning on and off the field. Thank you for joining us on the Big Business on Campus, the college sports podcast powered by Playfly Sports. So this is great, John. And I actually got the chance to come down and visit you probably a year and a half, 2 years ago, and see your sort of vision mapped out. I'm forgetting what room that was in that I got to see it, but pretty amazing to see that coming together. How can you tell us, like, how do you take that from vision, right? Getting the land, having this idea, to actually moving it forward, right? Like, a lot of our audience is interested in these concepts, but taking it from that vision and understanding the land and the opportunity and actually getting it to happen, right? Is it donor engagement? Is it developer engagement? Like, what did you actually do to take it, to get it to where it is today, and obviously what it's going to become? But
well, there's lots of different ways to do things, right? And as I arrived here in 2019 to follow Ron, there were some great areas of strength and there were some areas of weakness, right? And we were in the midst of a steady climb into a top under Dave Clawson's leadership, to 2021, where we won the Atlantic Division of the ACC 11-3, finishing the CFP top 15 or something like that. So that was going really good. Our basketball program was struggling, and that's, of course, been an anchor of our identity for a long period of time. And we had this Coliseum that we had owned for 6 years at the time. And our Coliseum, the Lawrence Joel Veterans Memorial Coliseum, built in 1989, originally a collaborative project with this big city bond, a donation from Wake to the city. City owned and operated. We were a primary tenant. We had bought it. It was showing its age a little bit, and because we weren't very good at basketball, it looked even worse, right? And so there was a lot of attention. What are we going to do about the Coliseum? Well, that wasn't our biggest problem. Our biggest problem is we got this like blighted area, and we've got facilities we've got to finish on our main campus. Our football facilities which are now as good as anybody's in the country, et cetera. So I really didn't spend a whole lot of time talking about the grounds project early on. It was really 2 years of listening, and candidly, we had people that would come to us and say, "Hey, you got to think about this, like Notre Dame has, or this or that." You could see that, but it really took for the first, and we also were interrupted by COVID, Michael. Where that was debilitating. But it really took 2 years or 3 years of really individual conversations, and so I think sometimes people take the approach of, I want to get something big done, so I'm going to get a big committee and get lots of stakeholders, and let's talk about what we might do. And that is one way to do things that can be really effective in some circumstances. That, in my history, has not been an effective way for me to operate, right? And so we really started talking about, as individual conversations with key stakeholders like Dee Dee Adams, who's our mayor pro tem, this is her ward, right? Dee Dee, what do you think about this? Right. And she was pretty frank. And if you read the Sports Business Journal article, she was pretty frank, and she's turned into one of my dearest friends. And then our local member of the North Carolina House of Representatives, Donnie Lambeth, who just happens to be the chair of the House Appropriations Committee. And with Donnie, it was sitting with him at Jimmy the Greek's, which is a little iconic place in this down market shopping center across from the Coliseum, and saying, "Donnie, what do you think about all this?" And with a piece of paper type thing and kind of a little napkin sketches. And then, as we said earlier, it is a place that there is a great history in the grounds area of live music, great entertainment, people coming. People have memories of going to Beatty Street, to Ziggy's and all these clubs, and hearing Hootie and the Blowfish back in the day and stuff that all was gone. So there's like a foundational element. But I would say a key moment in time was when we were starting to get some people pretty interested. We had our new president, Susan Wente, in 2021 came in, and I went to her and said, "Hey, we've been working on this, kind of trying to develop, see if there's a there with some different people." And she said, "Keep going, keep working on it. Don't stop." And then we got some more people together, and then the next year, all of a sudden, it's she's appointing a district task force with people from different parts of the university, and then we kind of started taking off. And then that conversation that I had with Donnie Lambeth sometime in 20 or 21, that turned into, in 2023, we got a $35 million grant from the state for economic development, for infrastructure. And that went to the city of Winston-Salem, right? Didn't go to Wake Forest, went to the city, but it is for this city land. And that really was the gasoline and the spark on the fire. And now the greatest thing about it is that everybody's fired up about it.
Mm-hmm.
People have come back all fall for games that hadn't been here. We come back for homecoming. We got a diffused fan base because we have a national university, and they're just blown away and more excited. And then another great thing about it is this land that we own, this 100 acres. We didn't have to tear down anybody's house. We didn't have to consolidate titles or change zoning, but it was also in the middle of an opportunity zone, food desert, medical services desert, jobs desert, all those things. And so we're starting to see them get checked off. And so on land that we don't own, without money from the university or investors, other investors have come in. There's an investor that's come in and bought that down market shopping center that's been there for a long time, adjacent across the street, and is going to upgauge that shopping center. Atrium Health Wake Forest Baptist has bought an old dealership, and they're going to build a freestanding emergency department that's about half a mile away from the grounds. But more importantly, that freestanding emergency department is going to serve all these neighborhoods where heretofore there was no access, easy access, walk-to access for medical care and services. So it's the economic development halo and that's what economic development money is supposed to do is build broader economic impact and quality of life for the community.
So you mentioned the one of the first things you said when we're talking about tax income and the tax income that the property generates. Have you seen any other measurable benefits in terms of like commercial leasing income or like donor engagement or increase in local partnerships because of the development that you guys are building?
Well, a big part of it, Corey, is that this project happens to be Wake Forest adjacent, but you notice we've been very intentional. This is not, Deak Village or Deacon Village or Wake Town or anything like that. This is the grounds, and the if you go to visitthegrounds.com, you can see all about it, and you can see a lot of different colors. It's not just black and gold. It's all kinds of different colors. It's very much a community project and a community economic development project that happens to be on land that's primarily owned by Wake Forest. And so when last spring I was on a call and our city manager Pat Pate's a great guy, come in here, a lot of energy, but he was doing a city briefing for which is Greater Winston-Salem Inc., which is the Chamber of Commerce essentially business development group, and he's doing the city update. And Pat Pate talks about right out of the gate, one of the most exciting things we got going on in the city of Winston-Salem is the grounds, right? It's a community project, and so we're seeing interest in increased development around the area. There's increased interest for different kinds of support stuff, hoteliers, et cetera. I'm starting to get, because some of these articles out there, getting inquiries from around the country from different kinds of venue operators, et cetera. As has been covered, one of the most successful projects right out of the gate that's already coming out of the ground is a 550 bed student housing, or it's independently operated, purpose built for the student market housing. That's I think $85 million investment into our community from outside of our community. That's going to benefit our community. So those things are happening, and it's really cool to see.
Well, and sorry, Mike. Just one last question on the development stuff. What exactly was built in the district? Meaning, how is it residential, commercial?
Yeah.
What
So
kind of
so
secondary
so
anchors? Yeah.
I'm glad. And again, you go to visitthegrounds.com, you can see all this. But phase one of the grounds includes all this infrastructure stuff. So we've rerouted what used to be a 4-lane Deacon Boulevard and curved it a little bit and put it on a road diet to make it more walkable friendly. But the first phase of the grounds, which is about $250 million of investment, will be a beautiful community amenity along Silas Creek, which is going to have an incredible walking path, experiential walking path type deal. This Creekside at the grounds, which is this first phase housing project. It's going to have 130,000 square foot purpose built office, Class A plus office building that is primarily going to be tenanted by Wake Forest functions, HR, development, et cetera. It's going to have 50,000 square feet of retail space, mixed use, mixed retail, experiential, upscale soft goods, deacon shop, brewery, that type of stuff, financial services center, et cetera. And this is all walkable from our main campus and for the neighborhoods around the campus. And then there's some green space, et cetera. We think that there's going to be a phase 1A and a phase 1B and a phase 2 pretty fast because you have some in the initial clearing, et cetera. You got some pretty nice plots for more retail, more residential, hotel, et cetera. I should go back and mention there'll be about 22 really upscale condos on top of that retail initially that will be. We have incredible demand for that, and we'll see some more private residence condominium stuff in the future as well.
And so when you think about that from a financial standpoint and a financial structuring standpoint, how do you set that up to make sure there's a financial benefit back to the university, and even more specifically for the topic we're talking about, the athletic department, right? Like like I get the community benefits and all the amazing things you just talked about, but how does that drive, athletic value?
Well, although I'm the vice president and athletic director, a lot of people say, well, why is the athletic director involved in this stuff, right?
Yeah.
In residential stuff like that. And it just so happens that some of the things that I enjoy doing and like doing, building economic development type stuff, um, it's really not an athletic department thing. Because at Wake Forest we really don't have an athletic department. In fact, we don't even use that term
Hmm.
internally and around our campus, because that term, an old school um, um, stereotype of that term is like the athletic department over here and the university over here. And that is archaic at most places. We kind of take that to an extreme by saying we're Wake Forest Athletics. We're just part of Wake Forest University. So my partner, as like the directors or the chairs or whatever it's called in our bureaucratic language, in the grounds, my co-partner in that is Dr. Jackie Travisano, who is the executive vice president for finance administration. And Jackie came here in 2000, the summer of 23, and she, like, right as she came in the door, she helped us nail down the MOU for our master plan developer, which is Carter Front Street. So as we look at it from a university, our first step area of investment is we got all this land, right? We're the land partner. And then we got a bunch of sweat equity invested into this deal, and connectivity and relationships and credibility, all invested. And then Carter Front Street, which is our master plan developer of record and has the primary option on all the partials of the grounds. They're doing an incredible job of providing expertise in development of these areas, of providing construction management with their general contractor, Currie, of doing capital acquisition to fund all these different projects, and tenancies, et cetera. And so that's kind of the partnership. So your question a long time ago is, where's the money going to go, right?
Yeah.
And I think one of the key parts of success in this deal is it didn't start out saying, we're going to do the ground so we can make a ton of money. This is how much money we're going to make, and this is who's going to get each partial of this money, right? We started on the grounds knowing that we had a completely underutilized asset, a blighted asset at that we had really important assets like coliseums and stadiums, et cetera, that someday are going to need more work, right? And that from our community and the university's image and future success, we didn't need to have a blighted area on the steps of one of the most beautiful campuses in America, right? That we owned. And so 80% of the first time visitors to Wake Forest University come from the East, which is primarily a post industrial area, and through this particular area, which was run down with boarded up storefronts. I mean, even the Coliseum, where our first year students check in to get their keys before they go, half a mile up the road onto campus, it looked terrible, right? This is where I'm paying all this tuition and it looks like that, right? So all of that is a long way of saying that the indirect benefits of there's indirect benefits of all this upscaling on all the brands of Winston-Salem, of Wake Forest University, and Old Town Club, and all the companies that are around here. And so elevating this land and the quality of it is going to elevate those brands or protect those brands and those brand values. And so, and then along the way, by having a more vibrant community and more places to go, I think we're going to be really competitive in the future for getting back more of the special events that we used to have in Winston-Salem when the Coliseum was built, because we're going to have, unlike a lot of places, we're going to have a really nice retail village and stuff to do before and after contests or games or concerts, et cetera, that you can walk to. It's going to feel just like the Battery in Atlanta, which actually has the same designer, Nelson Worldwide, and was one of the places that I saw in 2018 or whatever that kind of, lit the light of what we might do. And then along the way, there are as part of the terms of each part of the deal, there's some moments in time and the ability for there to be some revenue. What's events? That's the word you guys use up there in New York. Events that can provide some real capital revenue for the university, and at the same time, like we talked about earlier, the asset value of what we own has increased dramatically. Now,
So
universities aren't typically in the business of selling off half the university and flipping the land. But that's a good thing to have, that additional capital asset value.
This episode is brought to you by Shorts Sport Travel Logistics, the fastest growing leader in college athletics travel and the trusted choice of over 108 athletic departments nationwide. With their promise, Team Travel Made Easy, Shorts simplifies every aspect of team travel: air charters, commercial flights, buses, and hotels. By turning complex logistics into a competitive advantage, they've become the trusted choice for programs committed to winning on and off the field. Thank you for joining us on the Big Business on Campus, the college sports podcast powered by Playfly Sports.
So, first of all, again, thanks for plugging Mixed Use Real Estate. It's a great opportunity to drive people to our website, johnwallstreet.com. We're selling this new thematic report that we just put out, 40 pages, real in depth. If you're building or thinking about building a mixed use development, this is your kind of roadmap. You must read this. Events, a new potential revenue stream, but we're seeing college sports in general just becoming professionalized, right? What other kind of new or alternative revenue streams have you guys been able to find, tap into, et cetera?
Well, I think one of the things that Wake Forest has done very well for a long time, and I really recognize Barry Faircloth and Mike Piscatelli, who are our lead fundraisers. We got a great fundraising team. Um, you we talk a lot about football, right? And we're really proud of our football program at Wake Forest and the job Jake Dickert's doing, following Dave Clawson, following Jim Grope at Wake Forest here in his first year. We talk about college basketball, but we have our athletic staff and athletic development staff has done a great job of creating revenue streams around our elite Olympic sports, right? So if you take, for instance, the Wake Forest model, we're fortunate as well because our scale is such that we're not trying to support 30 sports or 25 sports, right? And as we all know, that primarily there's two sports that generate net revenue from ticket sales and media rights monetization and stuff like that, right? So we have 13 sports at Wake, or 13 units at Wake Forest, because track and field, indoor, outdoor, cross country is six of those 13 sports. So I have 13 unit leaders, if you will, from a sports standpoint. And we basically, under Barry and Mike's leadership over the last 10 years, well before I got here, those sports got into the business of sport specific fundraising, which we tried to get out of 35 years ago and have everybody just give to the Deacon Club or the Volunteer Fund or the Ahern Fund or whatever it was, and then we'll tell you how to use the money. And what these guys have seen is that, like, getting really personal about giving is what people want to do now. They want to see an impact, and there's a great market if you can spend time and build some incredible relationships. Dr. Carol Guth is one of those people at Wake Forest who passed away earlier this fall in her late 80s. Just a fantastic woman, and her giving primarily to women's athletics, but she was a fan of all of them. And it's really, really significant. So we see sports like women's golf at Wake Forest, which has won the national championship in 2023 under Kim Llewellyn's leadership, building on a legacy of Diane Daly. Our women's golf budget, we're gonna have direct gifts to the women's golf budget this year from individual donors. Direct, we got a women's golf endowment. We still put some central money from our TV money, if you will, into women's golf, but we're on a path to fully fund that sport. And that sport, I don't know what college athletics is going to look like in 10 years, but I'm pretty sure Wake Forest University is going to be in the big time women's golf business in some form or fashion. So that that's not like private equity or whatever, but that, like, it's a little bit like that, like, think about thinking outside the box. Well, let's go back into the box and go back to what's core of this thing is relationships, emotion, identity, and connection, right? And it just so happens we got these world class athletes in all these sports, and they enjoy the connections, right? So when we're playing in the women's golf championship, we lost the ACC championship last year on the last hole. Beat Stanford on Friday. We lost to Florida State on the last hole on Saturday at Sedgefield. There's about 300 people there following the Deacs all day, following our women's golf program, right? And so that's not 100,000 people at a football game, but those 300 people, they're really into it and they're really supportive and they're really connected and they're sacrificially giving a disproportionate amount of their charitable dollars are going in to that program because they love it and they identify with it and the team appreciates it and the coach does a great job of engaging in it. And in doing that, they're sustaining that program.
Mhm.
I'm glad you brought up private equity, an inevitability in college sports.
You're talking to a history major and a politics minor. And, I've talked to a lot of these private equity people, and we certainly have a ton of them at Wake Forest. And certainly, I think there's opportunities. Fundamentally, though, uh, we're still an enterprise. We're not a business. There are big business aspects around college athletics, but college athletics is still an enterprise, not a business, because businesses don't operate units which suck up revenue and generate no capital, no cash return.
Yep.
Right. So we're still operating under some government regulation type stuff, et cetera. So um, if I was choosing as a private equity person somewhere to put my $1 billion or whatever and get a guaranteed return, et cetera, um, there would seem to be some investments that would be a little bit easier to understand how I was going to get my money back than this one. With that said, there is an inevitability, I'm sure, Corey, but I'm probably not the one that's smart enough to figure out what that's going to be.
Even though you're a private university, right? Even though you have the private play, right? You actually have a platform that's easier, right, than the public play because you can
Yeah, and
form.
again, so I mean, at the risk of like completely getting out of my depth, um, you know, a university with a tremendous bond rating and all that kind of stuff, and you know, turning away 18,000 applicants every year. That has the most academically prestigious class ever, that's growing, that has market demand. Um, you can get pretty good financing,
Mm.
you know, in the bond markets, right? And
Uh,
you can raise money pretty efficiently in this environment. And so, if you have those assets
yeah,
and that kind of brand and stability of your business, and so where it becomes the time and moment to um, those other kinds of opportunities become compelling. I'm sure we'll get there at some point, but I'm not sure that we're here now.
got it. So in essence, access to lower cost capital right now is available. So why would you trade out for anything more onerous or higher cost capital at the moment, right? It doesn't make sense. That makes sense. Just to and Corey, just for a moment on revenue, just because that's my favorite topic, because Playfly Sports obviously a revenue optimizer for the industry. So I love talking revenue anytime I can. But how did the ACC's altered share affect Wake? And where do you guys sit in that, right? Because you do punch above your weight, but you are smaller than some of the others. So like, how do you play in that space?
There's two ways to make a profit, Michael. Sell more product, manage expenses,
Yeah.
and managing expenses is something I think we've done really well. We certainly did it at Kansas State, and we've done it here in optimizing return over those managed expenses. And um, no matter how much money and revenue if that you get and increases in television contracts and all this kind of stuff, um, if you don't exercise some kind of discipline on the expense side, it's never enough. It's like heroin. You just need more and more and more and more, and then eventually it kills you. And so I can remember, I can remember sitting in Mike Hamilton's office at the University of Tennessee at Stokely Athletic Center in 2000. I can't remember if it was 2007 or eight, and it was on the he and Mike was on the television negotiating committee under Commissioner Slive, and obviously Mike passed away, tried sadly last year, but Mike was on that committee with three or four ads and the commissioner, et cetera, and so the SEC was about to sign this, but I think it was 2008, Michael. This television contract was going to be $200 million a year. It was going to be more money than any. There would never be a bigger deal than this, right? Never, never. And what we were talking about was like, hey, boss, we're going to get that increased money. We better know where we're going to spend it, or else it'll be gone overnight, right? And that's basically what has happened in college athletics. And, we've been fortunate at Wake Forest, and I've been fortunate most of all, but, as people, there's a windfall and then boom, they go spend it. Right. So, I know what it costs per win in head coaching salary at Wake Forest this year. Right. And it's less than a lot of other people. The ROI on cost per win is better at Wake Forest than it is for a lot of other people. There's different reasons for that. But the ironic thing about this is when I joined the Big 12 in 2009 as athletic director at Kansas State, which was an incredible opportunity I was given, and went into the Big 12. I went from the SEC where everything was equal sharing. I went to the Big 12, and I learned that in the Big 12, out of the original formation of the league in the 1990s, right, 50% of the television revenue went into the pot and was shared equally among 12 schools. The other 50% of the revenue went into the pot. And if you were on broadcast television, because there was a distinction back then, and now there is again, ironically, it's come back, right? If you were on a broadcast television like ABC, you got 350,000 that week. If you were on cable, and I think we had TNT then, and now they're back to TNT, which is kind of funny. You got 180,000. And if you weren't selected for either of those two, you could go on Fox College Sports and get $10,000, or you could go pay per view, like Joe would do it at Oklahoma, and he'd make a lot more money on that. Or you could just not be on TV because you didn't want to hurt your gate, right? Just when you thought about stuff like that. And so basically every Monday you would find out what the selections are for the following week. Well, guess what? Texas, Nebraska, Texas A&M, Oklahoma, we're always going to be in the front leader for the ABC slots, right? And so now this year in the ACC, we basically have gone back to the future with that model. And the good thing about it is, from my perspective, is that it's actually progressive, right? And it actually incents behavior, incents, INCENT, behavior in scheduling to think about, okay, how can we schedule most creatively so that we have the best window, right? And that means we're being a better partner at Wake Forest to our big partner, ESPN, because, we're willing to move a game to week 0 or move a game to Thursday night or whatever, because we know, like when we played Georgia Tech this year, we had 1.8 on Saturday, 1.8 million people on Saturday at noon against Notre Dame and Southern Cal. But if we play a game on Thursday night or whatever, or move a game, we might have a better window. So I also know that the difference in our revenue, candidly, there's no big secret, we'll get less television revenue than we got last year, right? But it's still a variable that isn't the variable that determines whether we're successful.
Got it.
John, yeah, first of all, loving the big. What'd you say?
Probably last question here for us.
Just sure. Yeah. Well, first, I was just going to say I love the Big 12 on TNT, giving the Big 12 a lot of love that they're not getting on some of the other platforms. And as an Arizona alum, John, I'm watching much more Big 12 football than I did in the past. We talked about managing expenses. This is probably going to be relevant for the next several months. So it's a question I have to ask. We've already hit a record high in terms of coaching buyouts, right? We're not even through the month of October here as we're recording this podcast. You just saw Signetti signed another, 8-year, $90 million plus deal. The guy's 63 years old. Are ADs ever going to learn, John?
It's not the AD's fault. Now, ADs are responsible. Like we're operators. We're operators, right? The thing that has perplexed me for 20 years is why state universities with state boards have ever allowed fully guaranteed contracts. That failing and getting that out there, and I guess it was, and this is not a criticism of Jimmy Sexton or the coaches, but why it did. I think Nick Saban was the first one at LSU in the early 2000s. Why do boards allow that? So it's not now the AD ultimately is the one saying this is what the agent says. Do we want to keep the coach or not? Right? But why do boards of trustees and state legislatures, why do they allow that? That's what's caused that.
Hmm.
If the state of whoever said, in our state we will not we will not permit a contract that's fully guaranteed, or a contract above a guaranteed residual value of $25 million or whatever, the behavior would change. But that horse left the barn when boards of trustees allowed that to happen.
Hmm. Well, this has been an amazing conversation. Thanks for the time. We could keep talking. This has been a great discussion. There's so many other topics to hit and catch up on here, but we just wanted to thank you again, John, for doing the podcast, and for our audience listening. This is the Big Business on Campus podcast from John Wall Street, powered by Playfly Sports and sponsored by Shorts Logistics. So thank you for joining us, John. This is a lot of fun. Currie, I had fun again co-hosting with you today. So appreciate all the time here, and we'll see you on next podcast. And again, thanks, John, for being with us.
Thanks, Sean.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Currie, and appreciate what you're doing to John Wall Street.
Yeah, thank you.